Good evening, everybody. This is Brian Eads with my final episode of Easy Listening with Brian Eads for 2020, if you can actually believe that. I just want to take a second to say thank you so much for everybody who's tuned in this year, and you've made this podcast as successful as it has been. So thank you very much. Since this is the last episode for this podcast for 2020, I have actually taken the time to go through 10 different sports stories through the calendar year, and I'll do 10 60-second segments, each segment covering that particular story and how I felt about how it impacted me personally and maybe some of you listening. I've chosen 10 different stories throughout this calendar year, with the order not being any sort of way as it pertains to importance to me or to anybody. I just picked 10 that I felt were noteworthy and was worth talking about. The first of those stories is the fact that Washington Capitals forward Alex Ovechkin reached the historic number of 700 goals on February 22nd of this year against the New Jersey Devils. And for those of you that follow hockey long enough, like I have, know that once you get past 4, 5, and even 600, people really start to take note of how accomplished you are with scoring and what kind of player you really are in terms of some of the greats in the sport of hockey. The next story that I'll be talking about is NASCAR driver Ryan Newman with his season opening wreck at the Daytona 500, where he was leading coming to the checkered flag and wrecked coming down the short chute. The impressive thing to me on the entire situation with that accident wasn't so much the wreck itself, but the fact that after Newman was hospitalized for injuries for 2 to 3 days, to be able to see somebody of Newman's size and ability to be able to walk out of the hospital with his 2 daughters. And for anybody that's experienced that would know that that's certainly a heartwarming sight to see, and is something that everybody came together to try to be encouraging to him and his family, and it was really something that I'll certainly never forget, and I'm sure every NASCAR fan out there listening will never forget that as well. Certainly a story that I feel is definitely worth talking about as far as the Virginia, North Carolina area, where some of my listeners have come from, is the fact that this year marked the first fully canceled season for the Carolina League since 1901. And the reason I even bring that up is some of the big name major league players have come out of this particular league, such as names like Barry Bonds and even more recently Mookie Betts, as well as Jackie Bradley Jr., to name a few. This was another NASCAR related story that I found interesting while everything was shut down and waiting for the okay to return to some sort of normalcy, and that was the new form of racing called iRacing, which is basically a simulated racing game that it's a subscription service game, and the people of Fox Sports actually put on a weekly series with some of the top NASCAR drivers, and basically ran about an hour race as if it was like the real thing. And while I was actually home during my own shutdown with where I work, I was able to actually watch a few of these, and I was actually intrigued with this type of racing. As like I said, it was certainly almost realistic. In the NBA this year, we actually saw one of the all-time great franchises return to championship glory, albeit in a bubble per se. But certainly the Lakers have been one of those franchises that have had some notable players over the years, such as Kobe Bryant, Magic Johnson, and even now LeBron James. And to see LeBron win a championship with a completely different team outside of Cleveland and even Miami is just... I know people will make the comparison between him and Jordan, and I think LeBron has his own legacy to worry about, as opposed to having to be compared to Jordan or Kobe Bryant or anybody like that. Because I feel like anybody that competes that is that successful deserves their own legacy and to have it stand alone by itself. The NHL also had their playoffs in a bubble per se, where the Eastern Conference competed in Toronto, Canada, and the Western Conference competing in Edmonton, Alberta. And the Tampa Bay Lightning were the ones that actually won the Stanley Cup for the first time since 2004. And they've always been a strong regular season contender, but this year they finally put all the pieces together for their, like I said, their first championship in 16 years. As some of y'all may have seen throughout this calendar year, one of the most impressive drivers I've come to follow is that of Chase Elliott. And dating back to, I believe it was Watkins Glen of 2019, he has now won 4 consecutive road course races, which only a handful of drivers have done, including that of a former favorite driver of mine, Jeff Gordon. As with every NASCAR season, the champion has to be determined. And this year it was Chase Elliott who actually not only won at Martinsville in an elimination race to get to the Final Four, he also dominated Phoenix to claim his first NASCAR Cup Series championship. The interesting part about Chase Elliott winning his first Cup Series championship is he becomes the first Elliott to win a championship at the top level since his Hall of Fame father, Bill Elliott, did it in 1988. He is also the third father-son combination to pull off the feat, joining that of Ned Jarrett, Dale Jarrett, and Lee and Richard Petty. As with every sport, there's always that time in an athlete's career when they decide to hang it up and call it a career. And in 2020, we saw that with the sports entertainer in WWE known as The Undertaker, as well as NASCAR driver and 7-time champion Jimmy Johnson. And I don't need to go into any great detail to tell you how good both of those athletes are in terms of their on-track performance and as well as away from their respective field. The most interesting story of this 2020 year was to watch the all-time record battle between Drew Brees of the New Orleans Saints and Tom Brady of Tampa Bay in terms of the all-time touchdown record that was previously held by that of Hall of Famer Peyton Manning. I'm actually going to wrap this episode up with my closing remarks that I've actually written down. So just bear with me a second. As we turn the calendar to a new month and a new year, I often take time to reflect on the year that was. And certainly the most common word that I saw this past year was the word uncertainty. Uncertain over protocols to be put in place with public areas as well as in the sports field. Uncertain if a season could be played, and if so, how and where. But as we've seen over this year, the NBA, NFL, MLB, and even NASCAR as well as WWE for the most part conducted their entertainment as safe as they could. And if a problem arose in any of those arenas, those in charge of each league took control of the problem. As for me, though, on a personal level, I discovered a new hobby of podcasting. And I can say with the utmost certainty that it would not come to fruition if it wasn't for the support of all of you listening out there. So I say thank you immensely. And with that, I say that's it, and that's all I got. Thank you for listening. Keep smiling, keep believing, and keep dancing. And see you all in 2021.